Hey, real quick, I know you're expecting to hear screaming guitars right now, but we have a little bit of a sad bit of news to share before that. After we recorded this episode, our friend Michael Gaughn passed away, and we had been using his music in the last few episodes, including this episode, but we really didn't fully know the scope of his medical situation until very recently, but sadly we've lost him.
Yeah, and he was I think he was not as well known because he didn't review speakers. But he worked for Absolute Sound. He worked for Sound and Vision. I'm definitely leaving some stuff off. But he's easily one of the best editors I ever worked with. When I was at Sound and Vision, I loved turning my stuff into him because I knew it would be better, and I knew I would be somewhat embarrassed by how much better it was.
Yeah, I worked with him at Cinelux for years, and it was challenging. It was sometimes infuriating, but it was really, really rewarding. And he was, I don't know if people know this, but he was one of my closest friends. We talked on the phone. I mean, I think in the past 6 years, probably no more than 3 days went by that we didn't talk on the phone. And that was usually because I was in the hospital. So, but I did talk to him quite a bit when he was in the hospital in his final days. And I will say this, it did him a lot of good to hear that people had heard his music in our podcast and were responding to it.
That's good.
Yeah. He got to know that at least before we lost him. So anyway, I think we're going to use his music for a few more episodes coming up. We've got a whole album to pull from, and I think Brent, it's safe to say that you and I both love the music. So he
had the ambition of being. I mean, he was a pretty talented composer, but he was trying to get into more like film and video, video and video game, whatever media you kids have these days, and he was trying to get more into that and have a demonstration package. Which I helped him with on his Bandcamp page. Yeah. And so this is very, cinematic kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he was actually working on some music for a screenplay that he and I were working on about the abolitionist John Brown.
Wow.
So, some of that ended up in some of his music on the album. So, yeah. Anyway, sorry, enough with the sad news. We hope you enjoy his music. And if you knew Michael and you're finding out here about his passing, I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
Let's start the screaming guitars and let's do this for Mike.
Okay.
Audio Unleashed.
Oh, how you doing, buddy? We missed some big news in the last episode, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah. I think it would probably be fitting to start talking about that news first this episode. So, what are we on about here? So, while we were literally recording the previous episode of the podcast, the news went out that Harman has announced his intent to acquire the Massimo audio brands, and a lot of people, I think, got our last episode and were like, really? Biggest audio news of the year? You guys didn't talk about it? So we're going to talk about it now. Harman, which I guess would mean Samsung, is acquiring Massimo audio brands, which kind of makes them like, I don't know, the Disney of audio at this point. They kind of own everything. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What does this mean? To be clear, we don't know, but we're going to speculate anyway. But it's pretty big. They own a lot of brands, or they will own a lot of brands now. And let's face it, there's no antitrust legislation worth a dime at this point in the U.S. So it's not like any of that's going to be blocked. So this is probably going to happen, and we have opinions about it.
And we'll also discuss some implications of this, which didn't even dawn on me until I got a call from an old friend of mine who we'll talk about, who brought up a subject there. I was like, whoa, I didn't even think about that. This could have some implications far beyond just the homogenization of the speaker business.
Yeah, it's a good point. Good point. Anyway, what else do you want to talk about, buddy?
I want to talk about a favorite subject of ours for a long time here on the Audio
Unleashed
podcast, and that's cable lifters. Because once again, the people at the Absolute Sound sent me a thing. It says the Via Blue Rocket Cable Lifter System Briefing. Does not say review.
Yeah.
And Tom Martin, who is their Department of Philosophy department head philosopher or something like that. There's basically a long discussion about whether or not cable lifters work. And these are the things that are like little sort of sawhorses that you put your cables up on to lift them off the floor that supposedly have sonic benefits. And he goes into a big, pseudo-scientific discourse about why cable lifters may or may not work. And we'll hold it until that segment to let you know what he thought in terms of whether or not they work. There's going to be quite a mystery there. You just have to hang on. And
absolutely.
It is just the most. It's like an attempt to use science to cover up total non-science.
Yeah.
It's like you kill science and then you use it as a shield.
Oh, maybe we have to destroy science to save it.
That must be it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, it is. Speaking of science, there's an article in The Economist that has been going around in audiophile circles on Reddit, on Facebook, the little bit that I've checked in on Facebook. It's an article, let's see, who is this by? I just realized I don't know the author of The Economist piece. I don't think there's no byline here, buddy.
The Economist doesn't byline stuff.
They don't? Okay, well, I'm learning new things all the time. So the article is called "Compressed Music Might Be Harmful to the Ears." And I have seen a lot of people reacting to this story, some of them who at least understand that the compression that we're talking about here is signal compression, dynamic range compression, not data compression. But there are a lot of people going, "See, MP3s give you cancer. I knew it." And it's like, no, this is not about MP3s. This is about, dynamic range compression, basically reducing the peaks of an audio signal so you can bring the entire audio signal up in level, so there's not these radical ups and downs in the magnitude of the audio signal. Anyway, so this article is based on a scientific study that was published in Science Direct, I believe. Or at least that's where I got the paper. There's some other audio journal that it came from. But it's called "Auditory Changes in Awake Guinea Pigs Exposed to Overcompressed Music."
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the ways that mainstream publications cover science reporting. We're going to talk about what this research actually was intended to do, why they used compressed music, and talk a little bit about how, you can sort of, what's the way I want to put this? Analyze the methodology of a scientific study and understand how significant is this? How seriously should we take it? And we'll go from there. But
and I have to tell you, I have also done my own deep dive into this, and I will share my results with you. In the segment.
Excellent.
Again,
Very
more.
cool.
I just keep building the suspense.
Yeah, I love it, man. Got to keep them on the hook.
I should be on a podcast.
Yeah, I know, right? So what are we going to talk about for our patrons this week, buddy?
We're going to talk about something that I think a lot of people have been waiting a long time for, and that is Qobuz Connect. Mm-hmm. Qobuz is great. It was one of the first high-quality streaming services, meaning CD or better quality.
Yeah.
And also, it just has a good vibe. It has a great interface. I really like it a lot. A lot of people do like it. And it's kind of like a cooler thing for audiophiles to use as opposed to, more mainstream stuff like disgusting, gross Spotify or, Apple Music. But So now they have this Connect feature, and I discovered it by accident. I was using it, and it did it. But then I saw on Darko, like half an hour later, I saw an article he did about it. And basically what it is, it's a Qobuz feature now that lets it do basically the same as Spotify Connect does.
Yeah.
So it works seamlessly as far as we know. We haven't had much chance to experiment yet, but it should work seamlessly in Wi-Fi based audio systems. And this is just a giant deal for Qobuz because this has been like their only downside. Yeah. Unless you want to count not having immersive audio, which some people would consider an upside.
Well, they've got some, not a lot.
Yeah, it's token amount, yeah.
Yeah. But I'm excited about this. I love Qobuz.
Yeah, me too.
Unapologetically, I am a fan. And so given, more ways to connect with it that don't involve either my phone or my computer, at least not the entire time, I'm legitimately excited about this. So we'll dig into that. But first, speaking of Qobuz, speaking of lossless and immersive audio, we got a comment on our Patreon post for the last episode. And I read this as Henry Svenblad. If that is incorrect, I apologize. But he had a really funny comment that is also corrected an error of ours from the last episode when we were talking.
I think.
Yeah?
We'll discuss. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the new service that we were talking about, what's the name of that thing? True.
Pure Sound or something?
Pure Sound. Yes, that's what he's responding to. And he says this, really appreciate you guys and your years of knowledge. However, sometimes the podcast has an old man yells at lawn feel. I'm your age, by the way, he says. What's new about this service is that it's immersive lossless, right? So what he's saying is it's not just that it's immersive and it's lossless, it's both at the same time. So he says, this is different from Apple, Tidal, Lossy Atmos. And he says, Qobuz has a few multi-channel files available, but they are not true HD immersive. But anyway, he's got a good point. With regard to the streaming platforms, streaming music services, having lossless and immersive at the same time, that's a combination that is distinctive.
Well, I have 2 points. First of all, old men do not yell at lawns, they yell at clouds.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's, with these streaming services, it's hard. I mean, because Apple will tell you on Apple Music, it says, hi-fi lossless or whatever, Dolby Atmos right there on the track. And so I guess I didn't realize that, but they don't have both at the same time. Is that correct?
Or I think what it is they don't have lossless multi-channel immersive, right? So it's basically you can listen to your headphones and you're getting that 2-channel spatial Dolby Atmos, right? And that may be, but you're not getting, I can go to my Apple TV, run this into my surround sound system, and it is simultaneously multi-channel immersive and lossless. And that's what's distinctive here.
Okay. I just wonder how many people care, because audiophiles don't care about immersive, I have to say. But, I mean, I'm generalizing, but I'm right. Find me one who does. Gene Della Sala. Besides Gene Della Sala of Audioholics, who does?
There you go.
And also, we should point out that there's one thing we also missed that actually happened after we recorded our last that episode, and that's that Lingdorf Audio came out with hardware support for Pure Sound. Yeah. So there is some hardware out there that's going to stream this stuff again, but they have something like 300 titles, and it's all audiophile stuff, and I don't see a business model there, but I hope that one emerges. Anyway, we don't need to talk more about this. We've already talked enough about it.
So let's go yell at the cloud, not yell at clouds, but we'll yell at the cloud, because I think that's where podcasts are housed, in the cloud. Am I right about? I might be too old to know what I'm talking about here, but
yes.
Anyway, let's talk about Harman, buddy.
Let's do it, man. Or Harman/Samsung.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we keep talking about Harman buying Massimo, but we don't talk about the fact that means that Samsung is going to own Massimo. Although it's right there in the graphic, Harman, a Samsung company. But anyway, I think this was originally posted on, or at least the link you gave me was from LinkedIn. Harman International themselves posted that Building on a shared legacy of audio innovation, Harman announced its intention to acquire Masimo's Sound United consumer audio business. Funny that they're calling it Sound United again instead of Masimo Consumer, but here we are. And again, this literally happened as we were recording the last episode, so crazy timing. But is this too many audio brands under one umbrella, buddy?
Maybe. I mean, here's a problem is that, look, let's face it, the public enthusiasm for all these speakers and stuff is not what it was. And, a brand like a Polk, a perfectly fine brand, doesn't command the kind of attention that it used to. None of these brands do. JBL still does but JBL sells a whole ton of Bluetooth speakers plus a few others here and there. Same for a lot of brands now. Polk is not really exposed in that market, and neither is Definitive Technology, which is another former Masimo brand. Bowers Wilkins is, barely. They've sporadically been involved. None of them are really in the sort of modern markets. Actually, I should say Polk makes some pretty great sound bars, but beyond that, they're mostly traditional speaker companies. And the weird thing for me is, if you look at, Harman, is famous for having established, having contributed greatly to the research out there that's on what speakers sound best, right? And the Polk and Definitive designs are all done by people that, basically follow that research and, have adapted their lines to be, good like that. Yeah. Bowers Wilkins does not. According to Doug Schneider from Soundstage, who told me this, on Bowers Wilkins, you have a different engineer designing each speaker within a line, according to my measurements, and they're voiced differently. And if you measure a bunch of, say, Revels or something, right, they're going to be very similar. They're going to be very subtle differences, to compensate for the size and the amount of woofers and things like that. But they're going to be very similar. Bowers Wilkins is kind of all over the map. That's why you can get, in my experience, you'll get like maybe a speaker from the 800 line that sounds great, and then the next one up sounds bad, or vice versa, or sounds, not bad, but, weird, or something a little strange. So it's a completely contrary philosophy, except, Bowers Wilkins is an extremely well-established high-end brand, one of the most established high-end speaker brands of all time. So I will be curious to see how those
speakers are used at Abbey Road, for goodness sake. I mean, that's kind of one of the big selling points. Oh, you buy the speakers that are used, mixing all of the music they hear at Abbey Road. But I'm kind of with you, buddy. It's like every time I review a B&W speaker, it's like, am I going to love this or hate it? It's probably not going to be, this is fine. It's going to be, this is quite enjoyable for some stuff, or what are they doing to me? Why?
Yeah. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. There are brands, Campfire Audio and headphones, Totem Audio and speakers that do the same thing, although I would say there's probably a lot less variance in Totem Audio products than there is in Bowers Wilkins. And in Campfire Audio, Ken Ball, the guy who runs it, will come right out and tell you, like, hey, we voiced this way because of this. So if you like this, you'll like this. He's like super transparent about it. Whereas Bowers Wilkins are just like, these are the finest speakers ever and are storied. And did we mention Abbey Road?
Yep.
So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. That's going to be really interesting. And also the dealer scenario with Bowers Wilkins, I assume they still have a lot of, not so plugged into the high-end dealership thing anymore. I haven't been in one in years. But, Bowers Wilkins has been a brand that's been really big in, high-end audio dealers. And none of these other brands really are, I think, at this point. They're there, but they're not, real sort of stalwart brands of that market anymore because they're not exclusive enough. You can buy Definitive and Polk online very easily, and you can buy a lot of Bowers Wilkins actually online. Not the top of the line stuff, but a lot of the lower line stuff. So I will be really curious to see how this thing plays out. This is we probably need to go have dinner with Sandy Gross somewhere. the founder of Definitive, co-founder of Polk, founder of Golden Ear Technology, to really dissect all this, because he'll know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah. This may be a weird thing to fixate on, but I'm fixating on weird things here lately. But do you remember how much Samsung paid for Harman, which was, how long ago was that? That wasn't 10 years ago, was it?
It was about 10 years ago.
And they paid like billions, didn't they?
7 or 8 at least. Yeah, they paid a lot. Yeah.
And the press release for this, Harman acquisition of Massimo, which is oddly enough sort of headlined by Massimo, I think. Massimo Corporation, a leading global medical innovator, today announced that it has entered into a definitive agreement to sell its Sound United consumer audio business to Harman International. But the aggregate purchase price is $350 million.
It seems pretty low.
All of those brands, which I think really sort of speaks to what you were talking about before. The audio business is changing, but it's wild to me that all of these brands, Denon, Marantz, Bowers and Wilkins, all of those put together are, worth a tiny fraction of what Harman was worth just, 10 years ago. That's just kind of wild to me. I almost wonder if what they're buying is, the dealer network,
It's slightly possible, but how valuable is that dealer network at this point?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm an idiot when it comes to business, buddy. So I'm sort of speculating out loud about things I don't know a darn thing about, but I'm just trying to make sense of this, $350 million as opposed to like $8 billion, from a few years ago. I mean, like 10 years ago, I think we would have said, well, the difference in value between Harman and Sound United was not an order of magnitude or more,
Right.
Whereas now it's a few orders of magnitude,
Yeah. Although we're forgetting, though, that the whole car audio side of it, which Harman really dominates at this point. And now they just picked up I think it was Sean Olive who was pointing out that Harman now has like 20-something car audio brands.
I mean,
all developed out of the same facility. They just slap different, brands on them.
Think of the big names in car audio that they don't own. You could literally it would be quicker to name the ones that they don't own. I mean, Focal is still big in aftermarket audio.
Oh, I'm talking about in car, in factory audio.
Right. Well, there you go. That's a good point. Yeah.
Bose. They don't own Bose yet.
Yeah, Bose but Focal's doing some, and Macintosh is doing some first party, in car stuff. But again, Harman owns most of them. So, wow, yeah.
It's just more options for them to offer their, the different car companies, because if you're say, I don't know, say you're Hyundai and you're competing and you've got the Ioniq 5 or whatever their midline EV is, and you're competing with the Chevy Equinox, and Chevy has Bose, well, then you can have Bowers and Wilkins.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever. And so now Harman has even more brands they can offer people. And again, I've been in that facility and, in Detroit where they develop all this stuff. And it's, it's the same engineers doing the whole schmear. And obviously car companies can have things voiced a little bit different. Maybe, obviously you probably want to have like whoever the chief engineer from Bowers and Wilkins is these days. You probably want him to bless it or something, just to give you that, that kind of rich backstory of English, whatever. But, hey man, UK stuff still has brand appeal in the US. So, that's good. That's a good brand. It's still a great brand. There's no question about that.
It is. Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to say though, that I got like the day after this happened, I got a call from my friend John Kellogg, who I used to work with at Dolby. I also used to work with at Home Theater Magazine, and who has worked for DTS and who's now consulting. And he basically said, look, Samsung owns pretty much every important home audio and automotive audio brand, and they hate Dolby. And that's why, Samsung launched its own Eclipse audio thing, which is supposed to basically get them around, trying to get to work their way around having to pay Atmos royalties. And Apple is apparently working on their own audio ecosystem as well. This is a giant loss for Dolby.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting, though, and that is going to be a big challenge for what has been one of the biggest names in audio. And maybe Samsung will buy them too. They're public. They can be bought now.
No, I've got a plan to save Dolby.
What?
What they need to do is start licensing Dolby B noise reduction again.
Oh, yeah. That's right, because cassettes are coming back. We just saw, who was that announcement from that I sent you? It was... oh,
God, I can't even remember.
A new company just announced a boombox, like a $300 or $400 boombox, but it has, they can't, Dolby doesn't license Dolby B anymore, so they basically said, hey, look, we did our own version
emulation.
of it.
Yeah, emulation
of it, which is not hard. And especially if you have DSP, which everything has DSP now. But it was a pretty cool looking boombox. And oh God, who was it? I wish we could give him some props. Was it FiO? No. Was it somebody like that? Was it Weem? No.
I'm gonna pull up the audio.
Okay.
We Are Rewind, I think.
Oh, We Are Rewind. Yeah. Okay. They make like a portable, what in my opinion is the best of the portable cassette decks now. And
I remember you sent it to me because it's got VU meters on it. So it's got VU meters and it emulates Dolby.
It's really cool.
I think I'm going to have this thing, even though I've only got one cassette that I could even play in it. So
Dolby's going to go back to licensing cassette technology and ride the wave of retro formats coming back.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yep. Our inerrant predictions. When have we ever gotten anything wrong?
I don't think we've gotten anything wrong this episode yet, but then again, we haven't seen the comment section, so we don't know.
True. All right, let's move on to a publication that always gets everything wrong.
Yeah. All right. So let's go take a break, get some water, and come back and talk about cable lifters, philosophy, and hostage videos.
Yes.
All right. We'll be right back.
And we are back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics, one of what we consider to be the most vital accessories in audio. Vital to us because it gives us something to make fun of. But anyway, so Absolute Sound, they keep me on their mailing list. I don't know why, but it's just fodder for us. But so Tom... What's his name?
Martin.
Tom Martin? The head guy there, I guess, if Robert Harley's not. I don't know. I'm very confused. Anyway, it's a briefing, not a review, okay? And he covers the Via Blue Rocket cable lifter system. And what this thing is it's a, cable lifters are like these little things that are sort of like sawhorses that lift your cables up a few inches off the floor, right?
Right.
In this case, it has three different levels. So it's a little cylinder, and each cylinder has like little rubber band or O-ring things in it that suspend the cables. And there's like three different levels of suspension you can do so that the cables are separated, so they're not laying on top of each other.
Right.
Which is a little weird because almost 100% of the cable lifter use that I've seen was just for speaker cables. And This is like, I guess, if you're combining a bunch of signal cables and power cables and things like that all together. So what he does is, of course, the really simple way, and the way that would shut us up real fast to cover cable lifters is just to do a blind test of them, right?
Yeah.
Simple. This isn't hard to do. You don't even have to match levels. The levels are already matched. And, switch back and forth and see if people can tell the difference and if it's a difference they care about. So simple. And yet nobody will do it. So instead, they try to prove it using what they call science.
Yeah.
And he's really fudging here. He says, now, I must repeat this. I don't know if cable lifters work to improve signal integrity. As a reporter and reviewer, I keep an open mind, however.
Yeah.
Well, he's already made up his mind. He made up his mind before he wrote the first word of this thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And before the products even arrived at his house, he made up his mind. Yeah. And he's saying that, the null hypothesis that cable lifters cannot under any circumstances be beneficial, which, by the way, I haven't heard anyone ever say that, is assert, because I can think up situations where they would obviously be beneficial, except they're stupid situations. So it seems open to question given the research papers and electrical principles involved. See notes at the end in the appendix. And this is sort of the crux of it, is like he's citing these research papers that supposedly, I guess, provide evidence to support his conclusion.
Right.
It seems open to question because both pro and consumer audio use balanced cables at times. And the understanding of these is that they help reduce environmental noise conducted in cables. So we might assume from this practice that environmental noise is an issue, which is not the topic at hand, by the way.
No, it is not.
And because shielding is used in some cables, and shielding is thought to, reduce environmentally borne noise, that means it's open to question. I mean, he's bringing in an entirely separate thing here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And because shielding is not, cable adjacency.
Yeah.
And just all this stuff. And so I went and actually read these papers, right? Mm-hmm. Which I'm not sure he did. Maybe he did. Because he talks about how he goes, you can decide if these mechanisms and the supporting research cited are credible or sufficient for you to do something about it.
By the way, there's one passage that did not make it into the transcription from his video. I'd written this down, and then I went back to the transcript to try to find if, I had gotten it right, but it's not in there. So at one point in the video, he says this: "What follows probably won't change the minds of people committed to the idea that they have a commanding and comprehensive understanding of the entirety of physics and engineering. But for the rest of us, here are some things to consider." So he's basically saying, if you have any skepticism about what I'm about to say, that means because you think you know literally everything in the world about physics and engineering. And it's like, come on, dude, that is such a cop-out, Nobody's claiming that.
But he says in there, note that the test conditions are not identical to audio usage. And that is a colossal understatement, because I went and read these papers. And, I have better than average RF understanding for an audio writer because I review antennas, right? And I have, some RF test gear as well, right? So I have some understanding of it. RF is weird, but I do. And the lowest frequency that's mentioned in any of these papers that's referenced is 1 megahertz. Okay? And there are audio cables that have that are in a HDMI cable or something. You would have higher frequencies than that, and okay, fine. But in any analog cable, you do not.
Right.
And they're talking, the papers are actually really quite simple, and you can't argue with the papers, but these papers basically just say, hey, look, when you have two cables, they can't interfere with each other because, they're generating electromagnetic fields, and the other cable can pick up the electromagnetic field, right? Well, we all know that. And, the closer the cables are together, the more interference you get. The longer the run of adjacent cables, the more interference you get. Well, that's just very basic stuff. It doesn't prove anything he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
to me, this is, personally, I think this is just blatantly fraudulent to sit here and say like, oh, well, this happens in this one case. So I think it probably applies to audio as well. And I will say there are cases like, okay, if you wanted to run a power line, all right, power cable from your AC to your amplifier, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of voltage going through that cable, back and forth, 60 times a second. Let's say, especially if you put one of the few unshielded line level cables out there, like Kimber PVJ, which is a twisted pair, not shielded, but usually actually it works. Generally works fine. If you put that next to a power cable, are you going to get 60 hertz hum? Yeah, you might, but you don't need cable lifters to prevent that. Just don't route your cables next to each other, and is it going to affect your speakers? Well, I don't know, maybe on some very, very low level, but again, don't run the cables next to each other.
Yep.
And then they start talking about how, this also really bothers me. I've seen this in other, technical breakdowns of why cable lifters work, is the issue with the floor, this is just you putting your speaker cables on the floor, is the relative ease of a dielectric insulation material like wood, marble, stone, brick, or carpet. That's a pretty wide range of materials. To couple RF noise directly into a cable. So the cable is picking up RF noise from the floor. That is a strange notion because RF doesn't need a floor to conduct it. RF is all around us. It flows through the air. That's why we can get TV and radio, and that's why Wi-Fi works, and that's why Bluetooth works.
It's like the force,
It's this notion that somehow RF is leaking in through the floor just shows.
I wonder if this is like somehow a bastardization of the fact that the Earth is radioactive. Like there's always some level of radioactivity coming from the ground under your feet, right?
Yeah.
But it's tiny, it's minuscule. And we've got billions of years of life evolving on Earth in that context. If it were this huge problem, my biggest problem was if it were this huge problem, you'd actually hear it. There would be none of this crap about, it's timing, blah, blah, blah. No. As we have said before, when there is RF interference, you can hear it. This whole idea that it is this very subtle thing that you have to have a highly resolving system to hear, which panders to the people who, have these super crazy expensive systems because they think, my system is good enough to hear it, but yours is not. It's just all conflating things that don't need to be conflated, and it's taking evidence for one thing and applying it to another when it's not applicable, and that makes me mad.
Well, also, he says here, we have had the experience of RF coupling into line cables, driving amplifiers into thermal overload. Okay, just name the amplifier. That's all I ask. Name the amplifier. I cannot conceive, because basically amplifiers have filtration in them, right? Because, amplifiers, if you don't have anything in there to filter high frequencies, they will go into oscillation, right? And they'll just oscillate at some frequency and eventually they'll blow up, right? Pretty quickly, actually, they'll blow up. But, I've tested like a zillion amplifiers, and every single one of them I've tested had substantial high frequency roll off above, some of them down into the 20-something K, some of them more like 50K or 100K, some of them more. But still, show me the amplifier, and this is an RF signal somehow coupling into a line cable, which means it would have to be a really powerful RF source, right? And let's not forget, all this RF is all around us, right? It's all wave your hand. You're hitting all this RF when you wave your hand. We walk through RF. It's just all around us. And it's like, what is this RF source? Are you putting like a ham radio transmitter right next to your line source cable? Maybe if you did that and you had a really bad, horrible amplifier, which I will say, given the context of what Absolute Sound reviews, is entirely possible. Then I could see maybe it could happen. The thing is, I can conceive of ways I could build a really bad amplifier and and somehow find a really powerful transmitter and put it right by the line cable and maybe make this happen. But the amplifier would probably have blown up a long time ago for some other reason.
Yeah.
I mean, just document all this stuff. I don't believe it. I think this is false.
Yeah.
And, all you have to do is document it. I mean, this is what I've been trying to do this for my whole career. Believe me, I was not good at it a long time ago. I've gotten much better, but I try to say, here's how I tested, here's what I did, and here's why I came to my conclusions. Not this sort of vague hand-wavy stuff of like, well, we have had the experience of this,
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if it's, as I said to you jokingly before we started rolling, there's almost a sense that I get, and I am half joking here, but there's a sense that I get that he filmed this under duress. I mean, it looks like a hostage video. I just kind of want to reach out to Tom and be like, okay, buddy, blink twice if you're okay, right? Because they can't hurt you. Yeah, but I don't know if it's this is him just like, man, we got to do what we can for the advertiser, and I don't buy this, but I got to sell it. You know what I mean?
Well, look, let's face it. All high-end audio writers are, to some extent, hostages.
Yeah.
It's true.
I love this one comment on the YouTube, though. If you need cable lifters to lift them off the floor, how could you not conclude that the shielding in your cables is inadequate? Yeah, there you go. There's our whole segment summed up in one comment.
I guess I got to say, if you're going to get a cable lifter, this one looks like it's probably at least as effective as any other cable lifter.
Yeah, there you go. And they're pretty cool. Look, they don't look like Tinker Toys. They kind of got a cool industrial design, but
I like the AudioQuest ones better. They have like the little kind of piece of fishing line, and they have a weird plastic sort of bow.
They almost look like a weird like anti-skate thing, kind of a little bit.
They do. If we have to have an officially endorsed Audio Unleashed cable lifter, let's make it the AudioQuest one.
There you go. Buddy, I just stumbled across another comment in the comment section of the YouTube video that we have to highlight, and I wish we had talked about it beforehand, but someone named Ed2771 commented, unmitigated nonsense, undetectable and double-blind listening, journalistic malpractice, and the absolute sound, which I'm assuming is Tom Martin, responded. And this is a roller coaster. Like, I'm going through some emotions here, buddy. The response is, we suspect you are correct that a double-blind comparison of cable lifters would show no statistically significant difference. If you have done such a test, peer-reviewed, we'd love to cover it. Interesting. That is not the response that I was expecting. It goes on, or if you know of such a paper. Similarly, if you know of papers that have used, say, Maxwell's equations to show that the effects that industry engineers say may occur, in fact, can't occur, that would also be useful. Okay, so he's trying to have it both ways here. But yes.
But those are effects that engineers show occur at radio frequencies.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, which again, if you have a turntable, which most of these guys are into turntables, and you have an analog preamp and analog amps, there ain't no RF. There's no RF. If you have Class D, there might be, but the Class D amp doesn't care. It laughs at your pathetic little RF interference, which is at at vastly lower power levels than it's dealing with. And then it has a filter at the back end of it that filters all that stuff out. This is why this guy just drives me so up the wall, is basically he's saying, well, look, science exists. And because science exists, and I linked to papers that are science, that means that these products work. Or at least we must remain open-minded about whether or not these products work.
Yep. Hey, you know what, though?
What?
You know who does read scientific papers?
I don't know who.
Me and you.
Oh, we do. That's right.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah.
Do you want to go talk about a different one?
I do. I'm excited about it.
welcome back to Audio
Unleashed.
Nice. This time around, we're talking about science again. I'm sorry to any of you that don't like talking about science. This episode's kind of heavy on that, but we promise this is going to be a little less grumpy than the last segment. So, as I said in the intro, we're talking about an article from The Economist that I'd seen circulating around on Facebook quite a bit and Reddit quite a bit. And the headline is "Compressed Music Might Be Harmful to the Ears." And the funny thing is, probably a solid 30% of the people who were responding to the posts just saw the headline and jumped straight into, MP3 is going to rot your brain. Like, not understanding, no, this is not about data compression. This is about dynamic range compression. But in short, the article is talking about a scientific study done by Paul Van Pierik Bordiga and Tamara Suzy dos Santos, published in Hearing Research in November of 2024. So this is a few months old. I guess, I don't know, slow news day at The Economist. So they decided to dig it up and talk about it. But in short, even The Economist's summary of the study is a little bit misleading, because it's not like these researchers set out to find out whether compressed music is bad, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of what the headline would lead you to believe. But really what they were doing with their research was, for a while now, the NIH has been sort of talking about the fact that, is the equal energy hypothesis legit? We need more studies on this. And the equal energy hypothesis is basically the foundation for all of the World Health Organization's guidelines on noise exposure, things like that, right? So the equal energy hypothesis or equal energy rule or equal energy principle or whatever is basically just that, the total effect, the total impact to your health of sound is a consequence of total sound energy received by the ear, and the time domain doesn't really have anything to do with it, right?
Yeah.
But this paper was basically hey, is that the case? And I think their starting hypothesis was basically maybe giving your ears a break, even if it's just these small little breaks, is good, right? And so we're going to test this. We're going to take this Adele song. We're going to play it at 102 decibels RMS for a bunch of guinea pigs, because their hearing system is similar to our hearing system. And then we're going to do the same thing with a more compressed version, like a way over compressed version. And we're going to, again, 102 dB RMS in both cases, but one is very compressed and one is just the studio version. So in other words, there are peaks and valleys, and your ears get a little bit of a break. And they found that with the less compressed version, with the standard release version, the hearing systems, the muscles in their ears of these guinea pigs recovered, whereas with the more compressed music, it took a lot longer. I guess the main reason I put this in the idea board, and the thing I wanted to discuss, is basically you should be skeptical of any science reporting that is in any mainstream publication. And you should also be suspicious of any science reporting that, where people have an agenda, right? I mean, I've seen people take this at gospel and go, well, this proves that the loudness wars are bad. It's well, then, guys, that's not what they're talking about here, right? And other people are saying, yes, compression. Yes, we've known this all along, which is why you should always be suspicious of anything that confirms your priors, But I don't know. I think this is an interesting and potentially consequential study, not so much for the audiophile aspect as the aspect of what does this mean for hearing health and our understanding of how do you damage your hearing, Yeah,
this is a paper on health, not audio quality.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, a lot of audiophiles go looking for any sort of scientific evidence that supports their beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, I guess there's some applicability of it. However, this is about, hearing damage and how much damage will you get from a certain amount of sound? And this is really, I think this is very important because, basically what we do is we measure, the amount of sound that comes out over average amount of sound that comes out over a certain amount of time, right? Like when I do it with Bluetooth speakers, I do 30-something seconds of this ZZ Top track that's very compressed, right? And the average amount of sound that comes out of it at 1 meter might be 94 decibels, right? So what would happen if the sound wasn't so compressed? You could still have it loud, still have it at an average of 94 decibels, but you would have higher peaks and deeper valleys. So you'd have actually louder sounds overall, or louder peak sounds, but you'd also have some rests in there. And I think that's probably what the real finding here is, I'm just guessing, is that the ear benefits from having a little bit of rest, even if it's just for a second.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. Because, when we look at like the recommendations for exposure, and this is like maybe OSHA standards or something like that. Like if you look at like how long, basically the sort of the equal energy hypothesis was basically that you just take a weighted, sound level, right? If you go up 3 dB, then that means that the amount of time that you can be safely exposed to this loudness level is cut in half, right? That is just the way they have developed all of these standards. And I don't think they've got a safe recommendation for 102 dBA, which is what this study was done at. But like I'm pulling it up, the OSHA recommendations now, you can safely be exposed to 100 dBA sound level for 15 minutes. For 103 dB, it's 7.5 minutes. Again, that's the sort of equal energy hypothesis in action. Well, these people were exposing these guinea pigs to 100 dBA audio for 4 hours. So,
which is torture, I think.
Right off the bat, way in excess of anything that anybody would consider safe. But again, it did find that there was a difference between compressed and uncompressed. And so I think our safety standards, our OSHA standards are going to have to change, What is the sort of time domain component of this audio? And I think the way you described it is way more succinct and eloquent than the babbling I'm doing now. But all of that is a roundabout way of saying, yes, Brent, you're right.
I listened to, I described the Bluetooth, my maximum volume test for Bluetooth speakers, which is done, unfortunately, there is no legit scientific test for that at the moment. I have talked to scientists to try to get them to help me, and they're like, yeah, that's really hard. So my method is kind of okay. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good at ranking the maximum output of these speakers, although there's a subjective element. But some of these big Bluetooth speakers now, the really big ones, will break 102. They'll just barely break 100 dB in terms of, what they can do on that ZZ Top track. And I don't do it A-weighted. I do it Z-weighted, actually, which is unweighted. And
from how far away?
From a meter. And I do it indoors. It's fairly useful, at least for me, and it does give me some kind of comparison standard. And believe me, I have searched for years, and I'm still searching for a good one. If anybody has ideas, let me know. But, I'm used to hearing, I've heard 102, and I when I do this test with anything bigger than like a, something about as big as like a JBL, what is that thing called? The JBL Extreme 4 or whatever they're up to nowadays. Anything that size or bigger, I put on a pair of headphones when I do it, which is good enough hearing protection for that because, most headphones block a lot of stuff above 1 kilohertz, and that's where hearing damage occurs. So it's loud. Like sometimes I'll pull the headphones off just for a second to get the sound quality, because if it's obviously like really distorted or something, I will back the level down at a level where the sound quality is subjectively tolerable to me, and I will record that as the maximum level. Again, it's very loosey-goosey, but it's what I got, But I'm used to hearing that, and then 102 dB is louder than I can take for more than at my age a few seconds. I had a lot more tolerance in my youth, but it's pretty brutal. So these animals were not treated particularly well here. And this makes me wonder, how do you do the research on humans to find out what the human level is? Yeah.
Well, again, they use the guinea pigs because apparently their auditory system is most analogous, but also, at the end of the study, they dissected the guinea pigs to literally look at the damage to the muscles in their ears, so,
wow.
Yeah, I don't know how you would do this for humans in any sort of ethical, maybe we're getting into a period where you could do this kind of research, but for now, at least,
well, you can use cadaver ears and maybe determine something, which means dead people ears cut off of dead people, which have been used in audio research. It's a legitimate thing. The dead people don't mind. Yeah. I did want to point out, though, that I do take issue with one thing in this study, and that's that I got curious, and so I went to YouTube and I found music that was specifically intended for stress and anxiety relief for guinea pigs.
Are you kidding me?
I just put in a link to it, and it's an 8-hour music video for guinea pigs. And I played this. There is no break in the sound. There is no silence. It's either like a lot of string sounds, like just constantly going, and even when they have piano, they have like the sustain pedal on the piano the whole time. So the notes never completely die out. So it's just kind of real loud. I mean, it would be loud if you turned it up loud, but it's just this kind of the opposite of what they're saying. Now, granted, whoever Pet Tunes Music for Pets, which is the YouTube channel that posted this, I don't know how much scientific research they did on this. If I had to guess, I'd say they did about as much scientific research as, say, the Absolute Sound does on a typical review. And but anyway, I feel bad for guinea pigs because this music's horrible.
Oh, but they've got a playlist for chinchillas too. Wow.
God. How do they determine like which pets can tolerate which sounds? Oh man.
Maybe they bring somebody in to read their aura. Maybe. Are there chakras? What's the difference between chakras and an aura? I don't really fully understand.
I don't know, but you could do one for pet turtles because pet turtles can only hear up to like 800 hertz.
Oh, wow.
So you'd have a special thing for them that's just like,
yeah.
And maybe turtles would like it, or maybe it would drive them nuts. I don't really know.
But they live so long, they're not going to listen to this modern jazz music that the kids are listening to these days.
No, there are turtles that were alive before Charlie Parker was born. I mean,
weird fact: Steve Irwin and Charles Darwin owned the same tortoise.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know. That's your weird fact for the day.
Well, both of them served as staff to that tortoise.
Yes.
Basically, to say they owned it is kind of
absolutely.
Right. I think the tortoise owned them more than That's really funny. But anyway, so I just thought this is I think this paper is going to open up a lot of people like the NIH are going to have to look at this and go, wow, we gotta think about this. And it doesn't mean the old measurements are meaningless, okay?
No, of course not.
It just means that the old measurements are still useful, still important. It doesn't mean like, oh, that's all out the window. Now I can go listen to music at 100 dB and it doesn't matter because science is all uncertain.
Right.
It's meaning, okay, we have these measurements and they do work.
It just means they're probably too conservative, They're
probably too conservative. This requires further research, and I think it may ultimately, as you're kind of suggesting, it may ultimately mean, instead of us saying that, 85 dB is safe for 8 hours, we might say 83 dB is safe. It's not going to be a giant adjustment. It's not going to go from 85 to 80 or 75, I don't think. Do you think?
Right, because here's the thing though. It's what it is what they're probably going to have to figure out is if we take the most compressed audio signal, where are the safe thresholds, and then just make those the new recommendations. And I honestly don't know what that number will be, right? I think the long and short of it is the recommendations, the OSHA guidelines and things like that aren't going to be, well, if your music is compressed, blah, 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 or if it's this type of sound, but no, they're just going to come out with a new decibel recommendation in time. But they're going to factor all of this in. And I think hopefully they'll probably go with the most conservative, scientifically backed recommendation. But this is all very complicated. It's messy, and they're going to have to find a way to simplify that into rules that people can understand.
Yeah. And, OSHA now has a smaller staff than the Audio Unleashed podcast does. So I'm not expecting quick action on this.
Oh, man, that is a good point. Oh, well. Anyway, anything else you want to say about this one, buddy?
No, but, this is just another case where it's like, hey, science isn't perfect. Science is useful, but it's not perfect. And that, just the fact that this came out doesn't mean our old measurements don't work and we can ignore them. It just means they can be improved.
Like you and I have said before privately, like science is an incredibly flawed process, and yet it still gives us the best and most verifiable answers of any other human endeavor, right? And so that's why it works, no matter how flawed it is, no matter how messy it is, and no matter how limited its ability to answer questions is. Basically science is the process of trying to force the universe to answer one simple yes or no question, right? And in this case, it was like, this is probably the beginning of trying to figure out an alternative to the equal energy hypothesis. But this is far from the end. And every step of the way is going to be messy and perfect, but it will get us closer to the truth. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, that's good. So, should we talk about some credits for this issue? No, wait, this isn't an issue. This is an episode. Sorry.
It's true. It is an episode. Yeah, let's do some credits. So, as always, Butterburger Production means you and I did it. You want to talk about music for this episode?
Yeah, the music is by our friend Mike Gaughn.
You are editing and mixing and mastering this one. So, yeah.
I don't master these.
Oh, really?
I just let them fly.
Oh, man, I always run them through a tape bus emulator at the end because I like the way it adds a little bit of texture, and I like that extra last little bit of compression. So just tiny little bit of compression on the end.
Oh, right. I'll add a little. I'll run them through a Tube Screamer plugin.
Perfect. What more can I ask for? Yeah. All right. Well, patrons, stick around. We got one more for you, of course. We're going to be talking about Qobuz Connect. But for everybody else, thank you so much. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us, or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.